Hello, officer.
Ma'am, I need you to step outside.
I'm sorry. I have an appointment here.
We've received reports of suspicious activity. Step outside now.
I can show you my appointment confirmation, officer.
I don't need to see anything. I'm telling you to step outside.
I'd like to document this interaction. What's your badge number, officer?
Put the phone away. You're under arrest.
Officer Ryan Paulson was 38 years old and 8 years into his career when he made a decision that would cost the city $2.1 million, destroy his career forever, and land him on a national database ensuring he'd never wear a badge again. The calm woman standing before him with a leather bag wasn't a shoplifter or a trespasser. She was Dr. Ava Allen, a cardiothoracic surgeon whose patients included the police chief's mother, the district attorney's husband, and 2 city council members. She had scheduled appointments, pre-approved credit, and every legal right to be exactly where she stood. What Paulson saw was only her skin color. What he didn't see was the sleeping giant he'd just awakened. A woman with resources, connections, and an ironclad case that would dismantle everything he'd built. He thought he was enforcing the law. He was actually ending his own career, one handcuff click at a time. Dr. Ava Allen had spent 2 decades proving herself in a profession that didn't always welcome women who looked like her. At 42, she had performed over 100 cardiac surgeries, published groundbreaking research on minimally invasive procedures, and presented at international medical conferences. Her hands had held the beating hearts of mayors, athletes, and businessmen. She had earned every credential, every accolade, every ounce of respect her profession demanded. On a crisp Saturday afternoon in late autumn, Ava walked into Sinclair and Barrett with a specific purpose. The upscale jewelry boutique occupied prime real estate in the city's premier shopping district, its windows gleaming with carefully curated displays of diamonds and precious metals. She had an appointment scheduled for 2:30 p.m. with Marcus Levitt, their custom jewelry specialist. The occasion was significant. 15 years of marriage to her wife, Elena. Ava wanted something extraordinary to mark the milestone, a custom diamond pendant that would capture everything they had built together. She carried a leather portfolio containing her design sketches, photographs for inspiration, and documentation of a pre-approved line of credit exceeding $50,000. The store's interior reflected old-money elegance. Classical music played softly. Sales associates moved between display cases with practiced discretion. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across polished marble floors. Everything about Sinclair and Barrett whispered exclusivity. Ava approached the reception desk, her professional demeanor automatic after years of hospital consultations. She announced herself politely, mentioning her appointment with Marcus Levitt. Then a voice cut through the refined atmosphere. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step outside." Ava turned. A white police officer stood behind her, badge gleaming against his uniform, hand resting on his belt with practiced authority. Officer Ryan Paulson, 38 years old, worked security detail at the shopping complex as a side job. His expression held no uncertainty, no question, just an assumption. "I'm sorry, what?" Ava's voice remained calm, the same measured tone she used when explaining complex procedures to anxious patients. "We've received reports of suspicious activity," Paulson stated flatly. "I need you to leave the premises immediately." Ava's mind processed the absurdity with clinical precision. She stood in a store where she had a confirmed appointment, holding professional documentation, dressed in business casual attire. She had committed no crime, caused no disturbance, given no legitimate reason for this confrontation. The only thing suspicious was the color of her skin. Ava did not move. Flight was not in her nature, neither in the operating room nor in moments like this. She had learned long ago that composure was both shield and weapon. "Officer, there must be some misunderstanding," she said evenly. I have an appointment here at 2:30 p.m. with Marcus Levitt, the custom jewelry specialist. You can verify this with the front desk. Paulson's jaw tightened. The slight shift in his posture told Ava everything she needed to know about how this man handled being questioned. His personnel file, had she been able to access it, would have revealed 3 prior complaints for racial profiling. All 3 had been dismissed following cursory internal reviews. The department had learned nothing. Paulson had learned nothing. I don't need to verify anything, he replied, his voice hardening. I'm telling you to leave. Movement caught Ava's peripheral vision. The store manager emerged from the back office, a middle-aged white man whose name tag identified him as Gerald Winters. For a brief moment, Ava felt a flicker of hope. Surely the manager would resolve this absurd situation, would check the appointment book, and would recognize that a paying customer was being harassed. But Winters looked at her, looked at Paulson, and made a calculation that had nothing to do with appointment books or customer service. Officer Paulson is correct, Winters said, his voice carrying a hollow apology. We reserve the right to refuse service. The words landed like a slap. Ava felt the familiar burn of humiliation, that particular heat that came from being reduced, dismissed, erased by people who would never understand what it cost. On what grounds? She asked, her voice still controlled. I've committed no crime. I've caused no disturbance. I have a scheduled appointment that your staff confirmed 3 weeks ago. Winters shifted uncomfortably. We've had issues with theft recently. There it was. The unspoken accusation floating in the air like poison. Ava was a thief, not a surgeon, not a professional with impeccable credentials. A thief because in their eyes, that's what black women in luxury stores must be. She had been profiled. The how and why didn't matter. Only the outcome did. Ava stood at a crossroads. She could leave quietly, swallow the indignity, preserve the peace, or she could fight. She chose to fight. Ava reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her phone. The movement was deliberate, visible, and non-threatening. She had no intention of giving these men ammunition. I'm going to document this interaction, she stated clearly. Officer, what's your badge number? The question detonated something in Paulson. His entire demeanor shifted, shoulders squaring, hand moving closer to his belt, voice dropping into that dangerous register of wounded authority. In his worldview, civilians didn't question him. They certainly didn't make demands. And this woman, this black woman who refused to recognize her place, was challenging him in front of witnesses. Put the phone away, he barked. Ava raised the phone, framing him in the camera's view. Her hands remained steady. Years of holding scalpels during complex surgeries had taught her physical control even when adrenaline flooded her system. I have every legal right to record this interaction, she responded. This is a public space, and you are a public servant. I am exercising my First Amendment rights. I said, put it away. Now you're interfering with my duties. I'm standing here peacefully. I haven't touched anyone or anything. I'm simply recording a public interaction with a law enforcement officer, which the courts have repeatedly affirmed is constitutionally protected. The store had gone silent. Other customers stood frozen, their shopping forgotten. Sales associates watched from behind display cases. The classical music continued playing, absurdly cheerful against the tension crackling through the air. Somewhere in the back of the store, another customer lifted their own phone. The angle would be different, the perspective wider. This detail, this crucial piece of evidence, would later prove devastating to Paulson's defense. But at that moment, Ava knew only that she was documenting her own violation. She spoke clearly into her phone's microphone, creating an audio record that would be harder to dispute. My name is Dr. Ava Allen. I am being confronted by a police officer at Sinclair and Barrett Jewelry Store. where I have a confirmed appointment. I have not committed any crime. I am being accused of suspicious activity based on no stated facts. Paulson stepped forward, invading her personal space. She could smell his cologne, see the muscle working in his jaw. He was a man unaccustomed to defiance, especially from someone he had already categorized as powerless. "Last warning," he growled. "Put the phone away, or you're under arrest." Ava met his eyes. "For what crime, officer?" The words left Paulson's mouth with finality. "You're under arrest for trespassing and resisting lawful orders." It happened quickly. Paulson grabbed Ava's wrist, his grip tight and practiced. He twisted her arm behind her back with force that made her shoulder joint protest. Ava's phone clattered to the marble floor, the camera still recording from its new angle, a sideways view of polished shoes and the lower half of display cases. But she had been speaking into the microphone seconds before it fell. Her voice, clear and calm, had captured the critical words. "I am not resisting. I am being unlawfully arrested. My name is Dr. Ava Allen. I am a surgeon at Metropolitan Medical Center. I came here for a scheduled appointment at 2:30 p.m. Ava did not resist. She knew the statistics, the stories, the fatal outcomes when black people fought back against police, even in self-defense. Her body went deliberately still as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. First the right, then the left. The metal bit into her skin, tight enough to restrict circulation. Around her, the store had become a tableau of frozen witnesses. A woman near the diamond rings pressed her hand to her mouth. A young couple by the entrance stood motionless. Sales associates clutched their tablets, uncertain whether to intervene or retreat. "This is wrong," someone whispered. But no one moved. No one stepped forward. That was the nature of these moments. The collective paralysis that settled over bystanders when authority wielded a badge. They would feel guilty later, perhaps. They would tell themselves they didn't know what to do. But in this moment, Ava stood alone. Paulson's hand gripped her upper arm, steering her toward the exit. Her portfolio lay abandoned on the reception desk, its contents spilling onto the floor. Design sketches for an anniversary gift she would never purchase from this store. As they passed a display case, Ava caught her reflection in the glass. She looked dignified, even in handcuffs. Her expression remained composed, though her mind raced with calculations. She was already building her case, cataloging every detail, every witness, every word that had been spoken. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. Paulson didn't respond. He marched her through the store's entrance, past the gleaming windows, into the bright afternoon sunlight where other shoppers turned to stare. Behind them, Ava's phone continued recording until its battery died. And somewhere in the crowd, another phone captured everything. The police station smelled of industrial cleaner and old coffee. Ava was processed with bureaucratic efficiency. Fingerprints, photographs, personal items cataloged and confiscated. The charges listed on the paperwork were criminal trespassing and resisting arrest. Both were lies, but they were official lies now, typed into the system. Throughout processing, Ava remained calm. She provided the minimum information required by law. She did not explain, did not argue, did not try to convince the intake officer of her innocence. She had been through enough depositions, enough expert witness testimonies to understand that anything she said could be weaponized against her. She made one phone call to Elena, who answered on the first ring. "They arrested me," Ava said simply. "I'm at the 4th Precinct. I need you to contact an attorney." Elena's voice cracked with fury and fear, but she promised to handle it. Ava was held for 4 hours in a holding cell before being released on her own recognizance. The charges would remain pending. She signed documents she barely read, took her personal effects, and walked out into the evening air feeling violated in ways that had nothing to do with the handcuffs. But while Ava sat in that cell, something else was happening. The videos had started circulating within an hour of her arrest. The first came from the customer who had filmed the encounter in the store. Multiple angles showing a well-dressed black woman being confronted, handcuffed, and removed. The footage was damning in its clarity. Ava's own phone, recovered by store security and eventually returned to her, contained audio that contradicted every word of Paulson's official report. That report claimed she had behaved erratically, raised her voice, and threatened store personnel. The video showed a woman standing calmly, speaking in measured tones, asserting her legal rights. By sunset, the videos had jumped from personal social media accounts to local activist networks. By midnight, they had been shared thousands of times. Someone created a compilation showing the encounter from 3 different angles, the timestamps proving the chronology, the audio crystal clear. The hashtag Justice for Ava began trending. By Monday morning, the story had escaped social media's gravity and landed in mainstream news. Local stations led with it. National networks picked it up by noon. Black surgeon arrested while shopping became the headline that wouldn't die. And investigative journalists, smelling blood in the water, began asking questions about exactly who Ava Allen was. Within 24 hours of her arrest, Ava's identity became public knowledge. A local investigative journalist connected the dots. The Ava Allen arrested at Sinclair and Barrett was the same Dr. Ava Allen whose name appeared on dozens of published medical studies. The same surgeon who had presented at the American College of Cardiology conference. The same doctor whose patients included some of the city's most influential people. That revelation transformed the narrative. This wasn't just another case of retail profiling. This was a distinguished medical professional, someone who saved lives for a living, being treated like a criminal for the offense of shopping while black. The public reaction was immediate and volcanic, but it was Ava's professional network that truly mobilized. Within her contact list were people who owed her their lives. 3 years ago, she had performed an emergency triple bypass on the police chief's mother when another surgeon had declared the case too risky. She had operated on District Attorney Julia Hall's husband after a massive heart attack. City Councilwoman Gina Park had sent Ava a Christmas card every year since Ava repaired her daughter's congenital heart defect. These were not abstract supporters. These were people who remembered Ava's hands inside their loved ones' chests, who had watched her work miracles in sterile operating rooms, who knew exactly who she was and what she represented. The calls started coming. To the mayor's office, to the police commissioner, to Sinclair and Barrett's corporate headquarters. Pressure mounted from directions Paulson and Winters could never have anticipated. But Ava wanted more than phone calls and political pressure. She wanted the law. Amanda Walsh's office was located in a renovated brownstone downtown. Every inch of wall space covered with framed newspaper articles chronicling the firm's victories. Walsh herself was a legend in civil rights litigation, a black woman who had built her practice on police misconduct cases and won some of the largest settlements in state history. When Ava walked into Walsh's conference room, she carried a USB drive containing all 3 videos of her arrest. Walsh watched them twice. Then she looked at Ava and said, "They made a mistake." "I know." "No. I mean, they made a catastrophic mistake. This is going to end careers." Walsh's team launched their investigation immediately. Within a week, they had obtained Paulson's personnel file through a Freedom of Information request. The 3 prior complaints for racial profiling appeared like red flags waving in the wind. They subpoenaed Sinclair and Barrett's internal communications. What they found was damning. Emails discussing security concerns about certain customers, with coded language that barely masked racial bias. A memo from Winters instructing staff to maintain vigilance during high-risk shopping periods, which coincided with community events in predominantly black neighborhoods. But the most devastating evidence came from the store's own security system. The security footage from Sinclair and Barrett told a story that contradicted every official statement. The timestamp was precise. 2:28 p.m. Ava entered the store exactly 2 minutes before her scheduled appointment, approached the reception desk, and presented her portfolio to the associate. Then, unprompted by any store employee, Officer Paulson appeared. He had not been called. There had been no report of suspicious activity. He had simply seen a black woman in an upscale jewelry store and decided she didn't belong. The footage showed the entire encounter from overhead angles. Ava's calm demeanor, Paulson's aggressive posture, Winters emerging from the back office and siding with the officer without checking the appointment book that sat on the desk 3 feet away. Walsh's investigators dug deeper into Sinclair and Barrett's history. They found a pattern that the company had tried to keep buried. 2 years ago, a sales associate had quit and filed a complaint with the EEOC, describing how Winters had instructed her to watch black customers more closely than white ones. The complaint had been quietly settled with an NDA. They found another incident. A prominent black athlete who had been followed by security through the store had become irritated and had left to spend $40,000 at a competitor. The athlete had tweeted about the experience. Sinclair and Barrett had issued a boilerplate apology but changed nothing. The company had a documented history of discrimination. They had simply been lucky enough that previous victims lacked the resources or willpower to fight back. Ava was different. The pressure on the police department intensified. The viral videos had created a PR nightmare. But it was the police chief's personal connection to Ava that forced action. He remembered sitting in a surgical waiting room while Ava operated on his mother, remembered her emerging hours later to explain that the procedure had been successful but difficult. His mother was alive because of Ava Allen. 72 hours after the arrest, Paulson was placed on administrative leave. The internal affairs investigation moved with unusual speed. They reopened his 3 prior complaints, examining them with fresh scrutiny. What they found was a pattern so obvious it bordered on policy. In each case, Paulson had confronted black individuals in situations where white people went unquestioned. In each case, his reports contained vague claims of suspicious behavior that melted under examination. One of those previous victims, emboldened by Ava's case, came forward with new legal representation. Her name was Sharon Mitchell, and 2 years ago, Paulson had detained her for matching the description of a shoplifting suspect. The description had been black female, approximately 30 years old, a description that fit millions of women. Sharon had been held for 3 hours before being released without charges. Now she was suing, and she was citing Ava's case as proof that Paulson's behavior was systematic, not isolated. Meanwhile, Sinclair and Barrett faced its own reckoning. Protests formed outside their flagship store. The videos had cost them millions in lost business as customers stayed away and corporate clients canceled orders. The company's carefully cultivated image of refined luxury was crumbling, replaced by the reality caught on camera. A place where dignity could be stripped away based on skin color. 1 month after Ava's arrest, Officer Ryan Paulson was terminated. The official statement cited conduct unbecoming an officer and filing false reports. The body camera footage he should have activated but didn't, the lies in his written account, the pattern of behavior revealed by reopened complaints, all of it had become indefensible. Paulson's termination triggered a broader departmental review. The police chief, determined to prevent another public relations disaster, and genuinely outraged by what had happened to the woman who saved his mother's life, ordered an audit of all arrest records involving racial profiling complaints. What the audit revealed forced 17 cases to be reopened and reviewed. Sinclair and Barrett moved even faster. Corporate headquarters, watching their brand implode in real time, fired Gerald Winters within 2 weeks of the incident. 4 other employees, managers who had either participated in or enabled discriminatory practices, were dismissed. The company issued public apologies, announced mandatory anti-discrimination training for all staff, and hired an expensive diversity consulting firm to audit their policies. But apologies and training seminars weren't enough for Ava. She wanted accountability enshrined in law. Amanda Walsh filed a comprehensive federal lawsuit naming the city, the police department, Officer Paulson in his personal capacity, Sinclair and Barrett, and the company's parent corporation. The causes of action read like a civil rights textbook: false arrest under the Fourth Amendment, malicious prosecution, violation of civil rights under 42 U.S.C., Part 1983, state law claims for intentional infliction of emotional distress, and defamation based on Paulson's false police report. The evidence Walsh presented was overwhelming. The videos from multiple angles, the security footage disproving Paulson's claims, the pattern of prior complaints, the internal emails showing corporate knowledge of discriminatory practices at Sinclair and Barrett, expert testimony about implicit bias and racial profiling, character witnesses describing Ava's reputation, and the professional harm caused by her arrest. The city's attorneys took one look at the case file and knew they were doomed. A jury would see those videos. They would hear about Ava's credentials, her patience, her unblemished record. They would learn that she had been arrested for the crime of shopping while black. The verdict would be catastrophic, both financially and politically. Settlement negotiations began within 3 months. Across town, Sinclair and Barrett's legal team reached the same conclusion. Their internal emails alone would destroy them at trial. The security footage showing their manager refused to check an appointment book. The history of complaints they had buried with NDAs. A jury would award punitive damages large enough to make headlines. Both defendants wanted this over before it reached a courtroom. Ava, consulting with Walsh, agreed to settle. Not because the money mattered. It didn't, not really. But because settlements could include provisions that guilty verdicts could not. She could force systemic changes as conditions of settlement. She could ensure this never happened to someone else. The negotiations were brutal but efficient. Walsh, a veteran of these battles, extracted every concession she could. The settlement agreements were signed on a gray winter morning, 6 months after Ava had walked into Sinclair and Barrett for an anniversary shopping appointment she never completed. The city agreed to pay $2.1 million. The amount was substantial enough to make headlines, to send a message, to force the police department to take notice. The settlement included provisions requiring mandatory body camera reviews for all arrests, quarterly implicit bias training for every officer, and the creation of a civilian oversight board with genuine investigative authority and subpoena power. Sinclair and Barrett's settlement was separate. $900,000, acknowledging their role in facilitating the discrimination through corporate culture and inadequate training. But the money was only part of their accountability. The company issued a formal public apology, published in full-page ads in major newspapers. They donated $500,000 to racial justice organizations, including the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and local civil rights groups. They hired diversity consultants to completely overhaul security protocols, customer service training, and corporate policies, not just at the flagship store, but across their entire national network of hundreds of locations. The total settlement, $3 million. Ava donated substantial portions to civil rights organizations and legal defense funds that helped people who couldn't afford attorneys like Amanda Walsh. The remainder went into a trust she established for young women of color pursuing medical careers. a scholarship fund that would bear her name and help dismantle the barriers she had spent a lifetime overcoming. But the systemic changes mattered more than the money. The police department implemented every reform the settlement required. Body cameras became mandatory and reviewed. Training shifted from annual checkbox exercises to quarterly programs with real accountability. The Civilian Oversight Board began investigating complaints with teeth, not just paperwork. Officer Ryan Paulson's name was added to the National Decertification Index, a database that prevented fired officers from simply moving to another jurisdiction and continuing the same behavior. His law enforcement career was over. Not just in this city, but everywhere. He faced no criminal charges, a fact that Ava found unjust but grimly unsurprising. But his professional life had been dismantled completely. Gerald Winters struggled to find work in retail management. The incident followed him, a digital record that appeared in every background check, every Google search. His poor judgment had cost him everything. Ava returned to Metropolitan Medical Center, to the operating rooms where she saved lives, to the work she loved. But she also became something else, an advocate. She spoke at medical conferences about the intersection of healthcare and racial justice. She testified before City Council about police reform. She gave interviews about the everyday indignities that even successful Black professionals faced. She never returned to Sinclair and Barrett. She purchased Elena's anniversary gift from a small, Black-owned jewelry boutique instead. A small act of economic justice that felt more satisfying than any luxury brand could provide. The case became a landmark. Law schools taught it in civil rights courses. Civil rights attorneys cited it in briefs. Advocates pointed to it as proof that accountability was possible, that sometimes the system could be forced to recognize its failures and make genuine amends. Dr. Ava Allen had entered a jewelry store for an anniversary gift and left with something more valuable, a victory that would protect countless others from suffering the same violation of their rights and dignity. Justice, in this instance, had been documented, litigated, and transformed into change.